Hello, I'm Joe Neumaier, film critic for New York's WOR Radio, and welcome to the Q&A for Caregiver, A Love Story. It's my honor to welcome co-directors Kevin Gordon and Jessica Zitter, who is a palliative care and critical care specialist in Oakland, and the film's subject, Rick Tash. Thank you all for joining us, and congratulations on such a terrific, meaningful, and moving film.
Thank you.
I want to start off by, you're so welcome. I want to start off by asking Jessica and Kevin, how did you start with the project, and how did you come to Bambi's amazing story and Rick's moving story, and be able to tell it on film?
Well, I'll start, and Kevin, basically, Rick and Bambi were my friends, are my friends. Bambi is no longer with us, obviously, but they were in my synagogue, and I was following Bambi's situation along as she was going through a lot of very aggressive medical treatments. And at one point, Bambi called me and said, I need help. I can't do this anymore. And she had just gotten so sick and so uncomfortable. We came in and we brought in hospice and got it all organized. And then everything just sort of felt like a celebration. And it was this beautiful moment where we thought, wow, this death that Bambi is heading towards is going to be a beautiful thing. And she invited us in to come in and start filming. And Rick, of course, also allowed us into their home, because Bambi said, if I can help somebody else understand how to take control of this part of their lives, I would like to do that. And so that's how we started filming. And the original film was really supposed to be about a beautiful death at home. And Kevin, I'll let you take it out from there.
Yeah, basically a year after Jessica and I were connected, and she had all this footage that she had the amazing foresight to capture with these two filmmakers, two shooters, and gave me the footage. It was like, what's the story? Is there a story here? So I came on as editor and then quickly became co-director and co-producer with Jessica as we did some additional pickups and went back to Rick, did some follow-up interviews, did a postscript, shot some scenes that were also integrated earlier into the timeline. But it really was just this amazingly powerful story that really drew me in. I had my own personal connections to hospice through family members of mine, and was really excited to come on board.
Yeah. Rick, let's before we get into your aspect of the story, I want to just talk about maybe Bambi's really magnanimous and beautiful sense of wanting to share it, as Jessica said, wanting to share this experience of what end of life means. What was it like for her to kind of bring these cameras in and really kind of share such intimate details with them at this point in her life?
Yeah, well, sometimes it says my internet is a little unstable, so hopefully I won't lose you. But if there is, let me know. You know, it wasn't a snap decision. It was it moved over time, because she was really fighting it until it seemed like that wasn't the right thing to do anymore. And as Jessica said, she said, if it just helps somebody else, she's all on board. And for me, I will go with Bambi's lead. I mean, if Bambi was this too private for her, we wouldn't have done it. So, but that was her nature of her personality, that she's just a helper. She's a giver, and she wanted, even at the end of her life, she continued to give to people. So I don't think it fazed her as much, because they were very sensitive. The film shooters were very sensitive about how they did it, and they were not in the way, really. They just saw what was happening on a day-to-day basis, and were capturing that on film.
Yeah, I think it seems that from seeing the film several times, I'll just turning the camera on, you capture all of Bambi's beauty and personality, pretty much from the word go, which I think is extraordinary. Rick, let's talk about the importance of being a caregiver. And one of the moments in the film that really resonated with me is there's a moment after Bambi has died, and you're talking about the impact for the year and a half afterwards. And I think for any of us who have had that experience or known people who've gone through that experience, it's important to recognize how deeply impactful that really is, both while you're going through it and then in the time after, and what that sort of meant for you as you were kind of going through it and coming out of it.
Right. It was. I would say particularly for the first 6 months, I was in a daze a bit, because I was really trying to figure out who I was. because death is a point in time, it's a moment, and you're a caregiver to this person till that point in time, and then all of a sudden they're gone. Then you start saying, who am I? Well, things change very rapidly, and it was hard for me to get my feet on the ground after that. Plus, I still had Maya, and you're trying to make things as normal as possible for her. She was 3 at the time. Now she's 7. I had to really swallow my feelings a lot just to give her an opportunity to grow, because she's still a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
But I remember one incident, it was about 6 months later. I don't know if I reflected this. I don't remember what's in the movie, that I looked at Maya and said, I was coming out of it. I think it was very cathartic. We went to Home Depot and bought a bunch of plants and just planted in our front yard and said, we're planting life. And it was just a very meaningful moment for both of us. And she helped me, and it's still there. So, it was like a time to now begin to look forward and not dwell on the past. I think that's what it meant.
Yeah, absolutely. Jessica, the mixture of vulnerability and bravery that we see from Rick in the film is really sort of some of those core feelings that caregivers have to go through, among obviously myriad others. In your experiences, how as people go through this, does the experience either change them, or what are some of the factors that go into it? Because obviously hospice care and healthcare aides do what they can and do a great job, but when so much of the emotional heavy lift and those late nights are on loved ones and caregivers, what are some of those factors that kind of help them pull through and kind of balance out that the day-to-day and minute by minute existence of being a caregiver?
Wow, it's a great question. I think one thing I want to say about this film is that I didn't realize it was going to be about Rick. When I started, getting people to come in and capture this footage, these amazing filmmakers, I thought, okay, here, Kevin, here's a film about this beautiful woman. And then Kevin came back to me with this film that made my jaw drop, that I realized, oh my goodness, I was focusing on the wrong character. It's about Rick. And so I didn't really know a lot about family caregiver burden. I had never followed, even though I'm a physician and I take care of a lot of patients who are ill and dying, I had never actually followed anybody home. This was my first experience watching people at home once they're discharged. So my learnings happened almost after Bambi died. And I started to learn about family caregiver burden and what people like Rick go through and how many people there are like Rick out there. More than 1 in 5 Americans, more than 1 in 5 at a given time. And I'm still learning about the caregiver experience. So really, there are a lot of things that can support family caregivers. I think we need to do a lot more in terms of providing resources out there for them. And our government needs to put more money and effort into it. Our employers need to be more flexible and supportive. Our communities need to do the best that they can. And I think that it's going to take a lot of systems changing the way we practice to support family caregivers the way they need to be supported.
Yeah. Especially even at the end of the film, there's the notation that 80% of people would prefer to be at home, to remain at home, and yet there's still no systemic support system for them in that regard. Oftentimes hospice is not affordable, insurance has issues, everything like that. Kevin, that's a great point to talk about in terms of the footage that you had and the balance of it. Both Rick and Bambi are such dynamic personalities and really wonderful to watch. It's interesting to me to talk to a director and kind of find that through line, because you've got two people going through parallel but equally important situations that are at different tracks in the storytelling race, as it were, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think any viewer naturally is drawn to Bambi, both because of her magnetism and also because of the power of her decision. She's naturally the center of what's happening. And then as the film goes on, there's this point where you start to realize it's actually more about Rick and his journey, and kind of plotting out that arc and the key moments for Rick was a really essential piece in the editing. And then Jessica herself is also a character in the film because she's on camera as well. So that also had to be calibrated.
Yeah. And in fact, we should also say there's also a kind of a terrific sense of Rick and Bambi's family, and you have her sons, and you have eventually her young grandchild, and her rabbi, and there's a really beautiful sort of sense of the community around her, and you really get a sense of the world that surrounds her and that she loves so much. Rick, let's also talk about the relationship was new for the two of you relatively as you entered into this, and Bambi recounts so beautifully in the film. And that is also, I would imagine, not necessarily an unusual one in America. And when caregivers are thrust into this position, nobody sort of really knows what tomorrow will bring. And it was interesting in the film as a dramatic point to see to hear that recounted, and how the two of you came to that decision, how you proposed and came to that decision with Bambi. What was there a sense as life was going on that the conversations between the two of you kept going, or that you look back at certain moments and you kind of were reassessing, or was it always sort of being in the moment for you?
Yeah, I'd say it's closer to being the moment for me. Bambi, I think she mentioned in the movie that she said she gave me an out. At one point we were dating. You would never know she had cancer, actually. It was under control, and she was on therapy, but you would never have known. And then she finally told me, and I had to think about it for a moment. And what I said to her was, well, if we have 2 years left, let's make them great. If we have 20 years left, let's make them great, whatever it is. And in my head, because she was under treatment, I was thinking more like 20 years than 2 years, frankly. But yeah, it was more in the moment. She was very, if you could probably tell from the movie, she was a very upfront person. She never hid anything. She was always in touch with her feelings, and she was always upfront with me.
Yeah.
And that's refreshing, actually.
Yeah.
Good and bad. Sometimes it's not stuff you want to hear, but it's still refreshing because you get to hear it. It doesn't linger.
Yeah. It's mentioned in the film.
Sorry,
it's okay. No, it's recounted beautifully. Let us know again how you guys met. How did you and Bambi meet?
Right. Well, she was living in New Jersey. I was in California, but it was through an online Jewish dating service, where you're actually pieced together by a third person. They have to, it's like a matchmaker type thing. And the first time we had been talking for a couple months, and then the first time my daughter was graduating from college in New York, so I was coming back anyway, so we decided to meet. There's a lovely story there if you want to hear it, but I'm not sure it's totally related to this, but it's a nice story.
Well, it's a beautiful story, and all of it is related as well in the film. And Jessica, I'd like to hear from you about, in terms of as you were kind of going through this, if Bambi's how Bambi maybe expressed you any concerns about Rick, and because oftentimes that was the case in many times I would imagine that people are kind of concerned about their caregiver in a way, whoever that loved one is or whoever that family member is. And I'm wondering if maybe there were some conversations that you had with Bambi that reflect on that maybe we don't see in the film or that are alluded to.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened took Bambi by surprise as well. There's one scene in the beginning where she says, my sons are leaving to go back to Israel, but, our family and friends are around, they're strong, and they will help. So it won't be a problem. And you then, Kevin, I think, did a beautiful job focusing in on Rick's face. It's a sense of foreboding, because you don't realize that Rick's going to have any real issues. And so I don't think Bambi realized it either. And as things progressed, Bambi started doing amazing things. I mean, she said, at one point, if I have to wear Depends, I'll wear Depends. She agreed to go and leave the house for a few days so Rick could get some rest. I mean, Rick was exhausted, and she was, in her classic Bambi way, she was keeping the temperature on what was happening with Rick and doing her best, even in her incredibly incapacitated state, to support him.
Yeah. Kevin, I want to ask you about the process in some ways of kind of figuring out how to find the beginning of the movie, because oftentimes I hear from filmmakers that it's, you kind of either want to jump right in or you kind of want to set it up a little bit, but finding the right way to sort of begin is an important exclamation point, as it were. And the opening of the film, watching Bambi and Rick and her two sons singing, really says so much. Let's kind of just talk about kind of how you sort of saw that as the right entrance.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. We actually played with quite a few different openings. I think at one point during the process, I even watched the movie Love Story, the
Yeah.
classic,
Hmm.
which begins at the end,
That's right.
and even toyed around with some kind of that approach. But in the end, I think we wanted something that was truer to Jessica's experience in terms of, starting off with this positive approach to death, and then realizing that things are actually much harder than expected, that it's not that simple. And also sucking people in with some joy, something, that's really unexpected before we take them on, what is a difficult journey.
Yeah, yeah. Rick, something that I've read about people who are caregivers, which is that it's sometimes you have to sort of find that strength that you didn't know you had, and like we just said a couple of moments ago, it's on a moment by moment basis. But there does come that moment, isn't there, when you sort of realize you have the strength for that, and or you can handle it in some ways. I'm wondering if there was a moment like that for you, and it may have been just a minor epiphany, but something that you sort of realized, I can do this, even if it's on a moment by moment basis. I have it in me to have the strength for this.
Right. It's I don't think it's something that consciously hit me, because I was so in the moment. I mean, I just took care of whatever had to be done. I wasn't thinking forward. I wasn't thinking back. I wasn't thinking about myself, actually. I just did what I had to do. And there were times, I remember one weekend, I was just totally sick. But I still had to peel myself off the bed to help Bambi, because sick as I was, she was sicker. So, and you just have to dig deep and make it happen. So it wasn't really, I wouldn't say it was a conscious thing. It was just, what else am I going to do? There's just no other option.
Right. There's also that aspect to it too that I find interesting, that in some ways you kind of have to be a quick learner. You end up finding the tools within you that you maybe thought you had as a kid, but you end up realizing you still have them, which is, I'm going to need to learn how to figure out this oxygen tank, and I'm going to need to know what to do, all that. Like, did you find that as well, that you kind of had to be examine and rediscover yourself as a quick learner?
Yeah, some of it that's the mechanics of it, but some of it evolved too. Like when Bambi first went on to hospice, to get her to stand up to go on the commode, I was really just balancing her. It really wasn't, she still had quite a bit of strength at that time, but slowly over time, she got less strength and it required more effort on my part. So I evolved with her. As she was declining, I had to step up, and you just do it naturally, because you realize how much more effort you need as that happens.
Yeah. Just because,
So,
yeah.
Can you hear me? Because it says internet connection is unstable.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Yeah, thanks.
You're all frozen on my side. So
yeah, that's the miracle of technology. Yes, Jessica. Through either your patients or your cohorts in the medical community, have you found more of a concern for end of life care that is sort of going beyond we'll have hospice care or health aides come in and augment it a little bit? Are you finding that there's more conversation about this going on?
Well, this is interesting because, here I am, a palliative care doctor and a critical care doctor, but I'm really hospital based. And so, I mean, the fact that I didn't know about it, if I don't know about this, who else doesn't know about it? So I have to say that my concern is that the vast majority of practicing clinicians do not know about this, unless they're people who make home visits, or unless they're people, or they're social workers. Or I think that we have a lot of educating to do. And that's one of the things that we're really trying to do with this film, is create a real impact campaign to bring it out there to the people who need to know about it. The healthcare providers, the healthcare institutions, the healthcare insurers, employers, legislators. There's a lot of people who don't know about this issue that need to know about it. And I think this film, being short and being powerful and very sort of character driven with these amazing characters, has an opportunity to really start to raise a lot of interest and awareness around the issue.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I'm going to wrap up by asking Kevin, in terms of kind of following off that idea, in terms of the film making an impact, you've got these amazing people, Bambi and Rick, and you've got their amazing family. But in terms of the intimacy of it and watching that footage, kind of making sure that the points are hit, but it's also still as character based as it could. That's also an interesting balance, isn't it? To kind of make sure that it's still a human story, and it's still a story about Rick and Bambi and their love and what they're going through, right?
Yeah, no, it's true, and that it was difficult because we wanted the character driven narrative to be there front and center, and not to give the feeling of an educational piece. To us, it's the story that gets you intrigued, that gets you connected, and then all the education is what comes around it, which is exactly what Jessica's been, doing now with this impact campaign. So that's the film starts the conversations, then the education can happen afterwards.
Yeah. And Rick, what do you think Bambi would want people to know about your experience or about the experience in general? What do you think Bambi would want to say?
Just the impact of love and closeness,
Yeah.
and the basically the intimacy of this period.
Yeah.
We had a few very lovely moments and touching moments together, and that don't show on the film, wouldn't show on the film, but yeah. There's a lot of intimacy in this, and that it's very important for her to be in a familiar and comfortable surrounding and not in a sterile surrounding.
Yeah. And how about yourself in terms of letting people know what that caregiver experience was for? Did you talk with other people subsequent to Bambi's passing? Did you kind of work it out in some ways? Because as we mentioned, like there was that year and a half where you really sort of were dealing with it. What would you want people to know about the experience?
How beneficial it was to me. That's a great question, by the way. There was a lot of meaning to me as well. I felt like something that I didn't think I could really accomplish, that you don't know what you can accomplish until you're put into that position to do it. And this was not something I ever thought I would be in that position. And I can't believe that I made it through to the end with her. And I was glad to do that. Just that because we had such a connection, it was really important.
Yeah, and that comes through in the film so beautifully, and it's so moving and so wonderfully created and put together, and it's just a remarkable film. Thank you all for being here. Jessica Zitter, Kevin Gordon, Rick Tash. The film is Caregiver, a Love Story. Thanks, guys. Have a great afternoon.